Hi, I'm Paul Verschoor, and together with my colleague Ferdinand from Siemens, we are speaking today with Ilona Schmiel about collaboration in the arts. Ilona trained as an opera singer and is the executive and artistic director of the Tonhalle in Zurich. So I'm Paul Verschoor with the Convergent Science Network with my colleague Ferdinand Siemens, and we're speaking with Ilona Schmiel, who is the director of the Tonhalle in Zurich, on the topic of collaboration. But maybe to start, Ilona, it would be very, very useful if you give us a little bit a sketch of your background and how you ended up in the role that you have today.
Yes. Hello to everyone at first, and I'm very happy being part of this podcast series. And of course, I would love to give you a short introduction. I was trained as a musician, as an opera singer. I failed with my voice, so I studied then becoming a teacher. I didn't become a teacher because I was not someone who was happy with the system of education in Germany and worldwide. I studied also ancient languages, Latin, Greek, and cultural and media management. And then my first part was as an organizer in the staff of the Donau-Eschinger Musiktage in 1993. Afterwards, at the Olympic Festival Lillehammer for the opening ceremony during Olympic Winter Games. And then I went to Italy for the Arena di Verona productions. And then I make a short cut. My first bigger position was then from 1998 in the concert hall in Bremen, Die Glocke. I was the artistic and managing director there, the youngest ones in Germany with 30 years old. And as a woman, it was really a surprise for everyone. So after 4.5 years, I took over the Beethoven Fest in Bonn. And there I was the intendant and artistic director, so editing 10 Beethoven Fests over 11 years. And after that, I got really a very, very interesting offer, moving to Zurich. Since August 2014, I'm now artistic and executive director of the Tonhalle Society. And we are running the Tonhalle Orchestra, which was founded in 1868 with 104 musicians, actually. It's one of the oldest orchestras in Switzerland and definitely the top orchestra of Switzerland, the ambassador of Switzerland for great symphonic music. And we are also running the concert hall.
Okay, well, that's quite a career, though, that you had. Who would have thought, I guess, when you started as a singer? But so in our case, we really would like to understand the notion of collaboration, which can mean very many different things for different people. And in some sense, you have been exposed to different aspects of collaboration in this more artistic domain in which you're active. So how would you define collaboration?
Collaboration is, for me, finding a way, bringing together the best ideas, empowering people that they can really get a sense of common objectives and trying to make sure that everything is possible, that you can have success, but that you can fail at the same time.
But what do you see as the defining feature? So if you talk about collaboration, what do you see as the defining features of collaboration?
In an artistic level, it means quality. In a level dealing with collaboration in the organization, in the management, it means how we can make sure that we achieve the common objectives. What is the way? What are the steps behind that? And if we are talking about collaborations with people in other countries, then we have to define what is our mindset, what's the cultural background, and how can we come together in the sense of communication.
Mm-hmm. But you describe different aspects to also the implementation of it, right? But for instance, in your definition, you also mentioned this idea of objective.
Yeah.
So common objective. Is that for you a central feature of the collaborative projects that that you know about, that you're experienced with?
It is the first thing what we have to define.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have that, we are talking around and we're just then chatting, but we will never reach really a result. And if you think in an artistic view, you have to bring together, for example, 104 musicians. They have a clear structure, they have a clear hierarchy, and they have also clear vision, because there is a chief conductor like Pavel Järvi at the moment since 1920, who's one of the really top conductors. But for example, they have a clear vision, and this vision from the leading figure is being transferred to the musicians.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to interpret that or to translate that to the management team, then this means that we have the same eye level of quality, of having the same vision. And we have to find a way to interpret in our own way the steps to reach these common objectives.
But now this is interesting, right? Because if you, as you described the orchestra, in some sense, orchestras are also built in a very specific Western musical tradition, which is actually very hierarchical, right? Yeah. And so in that sense, you could say it's also built as a hierarchy, in some sense, to also reduce the degrees of freedom in the collaborative process. In some sense, that some of the participants are not necessarily active collaborators anymore. They're more executing a task, right? There are these extremes in the process. Mm-hmm. And so how should we balance that in order to get the quality of collaboration that you want and you need?
You always need to find this balance, that they have the most freedom they can get out of it. If they don't have it, if they are only executing, then you never will reach these very, very important highest quality.
Yeah, but if you have a big orchestra, like with the numbers you just mentioned, there is also a structure to that. So you want to make sure your conductor has maximum freedom in sort of developing the piece, even though also the conductor works within the envelope of a composed piece already. But then when it moves down into the orchestra, that the freedom that you give to the participants becomes more and more controlled, right? So how would you scale that? That's
not totally the aspect how Pavel, for example, conducts, because when he's giving a concert, it's definitely that every musician has to be very, very careful, very attentive, because every night something new happens. And it happens because there is something coming out of the orchestra, for example, from the oboe soloist, where he feels there's tonight another tempo, there's a rubato, and he is then guiding this person and the whole orchestra through that process. Mm-hmm. And it is more an exchange in the way of collaboration and communication, which at the end empowers everyone for that highest level.
Right. But there's an interesting tension now, right? Because on the one hand, there's an envelope of interaction, which could be the composed piece. Mm-hmm. But then within that envelope, there's movement. And that movement is structured also along hierarchical lines. So at what point does that stop to be collaboration?
At the end, there's a clear bar, there's a clear timing, and mm-hmm. there's a clear final. And there definitely it stops. And there are also in between some aspects of no-goes. Mm-hmm. And these little no-goes, they are defined during that rehearsal process, where the way how we interpret something is done. And then at the end, the result is coming up in the concert. Mm-hmm. But it's a different process. If you compare it with the management, then these are totally different aspects how we achieve goals.
Mm-hmm. But so what you sketch here is also this transition from a very deliberate and conscious process to a more habitual collective process, right? So initially there's a conscious searching for how all the pieces might fit together, and all the pieces are the different actors in that context. But through the rehearsal process, you start to make what was deliberate initially more habitual, so it can be actually performed in a comprehensive way. There's this transition point from the deliberation to the habit execution.
Yes.
So how do you value that in the collaborative process? So when do you say, well, this is still collaboration and this is execution, or would you capture that all under that same notion of the orchestra members are collaborating with the conductor to deliver the piece?
I would say it in with your last sentence. They are together. They are collaborating at any time, but they are offering different qualities, different ideas, musical ideas, during different rehearsal aspects.
Right.
And I think the huge ability of great conductors is to work with these offering musical ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just a conductor who is doing his own stuff, then he or she would never react to that in that way.
Right.
And on the highest level of quality, this is one of the secrets, when there are then at the end these fantastic moments where you never experienced before what you could get out of it. And then it's unique. But this only happens if you have a very, very strong collaborative idea, a very strong collaboration working process. And then at the end in the concert, there's a certain freedom.
Mm-hmm. Right. But this is really very interesting. And but now, in some sense, you could also argue, so you also link the notion of the aesthetical quality to that sort of collaborative aspect of the performance, which also would give it a quality of being, let's say, creative and surprising. But on the other hand, you could also, but maybe that can only be detected by the real experts. Maybe if I listen to this performance for the first time, I would not be able to pick up these subtle variations, right? So what's the resolution here?
I won't agree about that, because if it's a very, very single concert which has a huge impact and which is unique, I'm absolutely sure that even a person who had never attended a concert will feel that there's something very, very special happening.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We are speaking about, at the end, about something where we don't have really the right words.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because this is then a magic moment which you can only have in the live concert situation. You will never have that, for example, at the moment in a streaming concert, podcast, download, whatever. So all these technical devices, they help us, but the real experience about that moment and about this special collaboration in that moment is only something which you can get in the live concert situation.
So you're saying our podcast interview will not be an aesthetical highlight of the day? No, it's fine. I'm just kidding. But so that, okay, there are many other sides to your experience that are extremely interesting. But if we stick now to just this aspect of the performance and how it comes about, now within the process that you sketched, there are, of course, many different characters and personalities that all have to be managed carefully to actually play their part constructively. So now, how does that come in to that process? Right, I mentioned earlier with this caricature of the Western musical tradition, very hierarchically organized. You also make it very clear this is not the full picture. But now, in order to keep that structure together, you have to manage 100, 200 people, maybe even more, who in the end collectively have to produce that piece. So how do you manage the actors in that system?
At first, the education level of all these musicians nowadays is very, very high. Mm-hmm. And the process, how they are coming into an orchestra, how they have to go step by step before they are arriving in a professional orchestra, is a very hard process in their education. And they have to give an audition. And during this audition, they are only having the chance to show their ability and their instrumental skills. They're even not talking with each other, which is something in the future where I would say it's so important to get an idea. What is it for a person what's kind of personality with whom we are being connected afterwards. But at the moment, it's just an audition. And the first part of the audition is even behind a curtain, so that you have no idea who's sitting there, who's standing there, who's playing. You have no idea. You just listen to the music. And the music they have to play, these are pieces, bits of pieces, which they know before. And this is the most hardest process. So they only show their musical, instrumental quality in this very short amount of time, sometimes 3 to 5 minutes. It's not more when they have this audition. They have to put in all their impact, all their passion, all their roots, everything they try to interpret with their instrument, only within this very short amount of time. And then in the second round or the third round, when they get there, maybe they are elected, they get the possibility to perform with the orchestra, and then they are for 1 year on trial. And during that year, it happens that the group, it depends a little bit, is it a solo position or is it a group in the first violin section or double bass section, for example. So it depends really where is the position. But during that year, not only the sectionals, the groups are voting for that person, the whole orchestra at the end is voting if they want to have this person being a member of the orchestra. And if she or he gets then definitely the confirmation that she is elected, then they are there for life. They have a position for life. So this is something which is a really interesting, hard process. And it's also a question if we change that in the future. It's the European way of having that process, being a member. But coming back to your question, all these aspects, where do you come from? What have you learned before? Where are your roots? What's your language? Very often it's a language issue. You seem, or it seems to be that they are understanding each other musically, but when they are then rehearsing and speaking with each other, they are having totally different mindsets and mentalities. And also the question, what are the expectations being today an orchestra musicians? They are totally different.
Mm-hmm. But Ilona, this is extremely challenging, right? Because it also means that if the group dynamic that is existing before a new potential member enters, that group dynamic could strongly bias the future evolution of an orchestra and not necessarily in a direction you might want if you are the artistic leader of such an environment. So do you think this is a wise process? So the group deciding in this way, is it always leading to good outcomes? Because you already mentioned that you might have to reconsider that. So in a broader perspective, not just for Tonhalle, but in a general perspective, do you feel this process is healthy and effective, or does it lead to sort of a conformity to a group thing that might, on the long term, not really be a good artistic environment?
We are talking about the highest quality, and we are talking also about a special orchestra sound. And what the group knows very, very well during the rehearsal processes over some months with a new member, if the sound and mentality of this person will fit into the group.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But in your experience, have you seen this go off the rails, this process? That, for instance, that the artistic leader had a vision on how the orchestra should develop, but you saw the group collectively and implicitly was sort of moving in a different direction that was almost unstoppable.
I would say in orchestras with a very high quality, that happens not so often. But if you're really in this middle section of quality and positioning, that happens very often. Mm-hmm. Because then a group is able to create an own quality.
Exactly.
And this not always matches with the artistic leader's visions.
So in your experience, what have been the most dramatic failures of that model of collaboration? Like a whole, let's say, high-level orchestra actually just fragmenting?
I think the huge challenge at the moment is to find really leaders for positions, open positions, where all over the world, for example, a viola leader, section leader, we have over the world 10, 15 of the top positions there at the moment auditioning. Mm-hmm. And you have all over the world only a few who are able to take over that position. And I think there it is so hard to find the right candidate and to see in the way if a group is possible to let in a strong figure, mm-hmm. person with a strong character, because this person with a strong character will guide and influence and give an impact to the whole group and at the end to the whole orchestra as well. I think there is an aspect where we have to be very careful.
Okay.
I cannot decide this process because as an artistic and executive director, you are only involved being part of that. You're sometimes trying to give a sort of mediation when it's going totally wrong, but I'm not electing these people.
Sure.
Not electing the musicians, but I can consult, of course, the group. I can consult together with a chief conductor if this matches as a team, and this is a very, very good team between Pava and me, that we can consult in a way a group that they find the right quality and that they accept a strong character and that they find really an ideal candidate.
But so it's not that in your area, there are classic stories or anecdotes like, oh, Orchestra X in 1950 collapsed because they went off the rails and became a pathological group.
Oh.
Okay. So, but now, if you look at also these groups evolve, right? They grow, and the members of the group in themselves also have a personal trajectory of growth, which of course can also lead to conflict. So, So how is that managed? The personal growth of the members of a complex environment like an orchestra, and the overall direction that the collective is taking under the leadership of their artistic director.
The main part is that the collaboration works very well with the artistic director, with the chief conductor like Pavel. But on the other hand, you need to give them, to every member in the orchestra, give them a possibility to show their own musical quality. And we do that, for example, with chamber music, that they have their own series where they can really curate and invent programs and where they can show where they can get and enhance their visibility on their own. So on the other hand, they need, beside being sitting in the group, having a fixed position, we give them really a space and a possibility to be part of a bigger construction of the concert hall.
Right. So that also means you acknowledge that every individual has sort of a space of exploration, that this does not necessarily fit in the envelope of the larger collective, but you give another channel for that,
yes,
which is more smaller, where people can say, look, go explore, right? Find new boundaries, but within the broader picture, this is what we're doing, mm-hmm. right? It's sort of that kind of balance that you're trying to strike. Okay. Yep. So now on the other hand, of course, that what we should never forget for complex organizations like the Tonhalle, there's a whole infrastructure, management structure around, in the end, the performers and the orchestra. So does that operate on similar principles, or does that follow a different kind of managerial model?
I would say it's a different kind of a managerial model, because in the management team, we couldn't only work like, here's the guidance and let's go for it. And I would say every morning, come on, today we are doing that. And the result at the end of the day should be that. So it's a different model, definitely, because we are not on stage, but we need on the same eye level being very productive and being very creative. So, for example, at the moment, during dealing with COVID-19, we learned at the management organization how to enrich and how to raise up our flexibility. Normally, we have planned, let's say, years in advance months in advance. Now we are planning